Hi everyone, it's Caroline here again. I'm delighted to have your attention for this next talk that is in phase one. I'm calling it a phase now. I've decided about it, and I was grappling with words to see what it was, steps or stages, but I think a phase is probably the best because, as we know in life, we go through phases and they're not solid. There's a kind of an organic movement from one phase to the next. So it's not it's a subtle movement. So I think I'm going to call it a phase, and this phase of retreat that I've discussed in the previous lecture was an introduction into what retreat means and the pulling back from the exterior to the interior. And I talked about introducing you to the two weapons, warrior weapons, that we're going to be used to training ourselves to start to inquire into a deeper sense of ourselves and into that self-discovery and self-knowledge. So the first one is to represent in a symbolic way stillness, which is, I call it the Light Saber, which is when we sit in silence and we sit in stillness, we are creating an opening for that newness to arrive into us. And it's to still our minds into and bring it into the present moment. And whatever arrives, excuse me, in that present moment is what we need to presence, as in what we need to try to integrate and what we need to release. Because what we're trying to do when we're sitting in stillness and we are trying to unblock different aspects of ourselves that have been frozen off, that are unconscious to us. Because as we go through life, and when we are kind of born into a culture and into a family, there are certain aspects of ourselves that aren't available to us, and they're like locked doors. They're like doors, in this cottage that I'm talking about. I suppose maybe to use it as an analogy that, I suppose when you start on that phase of self-discovery and you feel it's time to retreat into a stiller place and into a place of contemplation, it does seem to be very scary and frightening because you're going into the unknown, because you become aware that you really don't have a very deep knowledge of yourself. The only knowledge you have of yourself is what people have reflected back to you about yourself. And sometimes that hasn't been true, that hasn't been correct. Sometimes that has been a reflection of their own inner turmoil or shadows. So it's a discernment in sitting and entering that space. And it was funny because when I went into the cottage, just even on a visual representation of what I saw in the cottage when we actually bought a cottage in the west of Ireland, and I had been kind of thinking I would love to have a place to go away and to retreat and to take time out from our busy lives, and because there was a lot of stress around running your own design business, and I thought for my husband and for well-being that would be a good investment, and it could be a good project and positive thing to be kind of bringing the children back into a more simple way of life, and a more connected to that connection I had with simplicity as a child, growing up in in Rathnewer, Wexford. And, you know, I didn't see that space of wildness and nature really present that much in life today. So when we came across this cottage, it was very run down looking. It was dilapidated. It had started to, somebody had started trying to renovate it, and then they had left it. So it was partially renovated, we'll say. There was structures there already, and then there was new structure and old structures, and the trees around it were ominous, you know. They were kind of half dead, you know. It looked a little bit, it looked scary, you know. It looked frightening, it looked dark, and it looked unloved and unkempt and unknown. And, you know, there was old furniture in there. There was furniture from a different era. There was, you know, a lot of cobwebs and, you know, dust, and you know, it needed love. It needed love, attention. It needed somebody to have a vision for its future, for what the potential it had, and the value that it had, you know. And, you know, it's all about perception, that if you can look on life and see potential, you know, that is the spark of creativity. Excuse me a second. Sorry about that, somebody came to the door. Yeah, I'm talking about, you know, our perception of when we can see something that is run down and looks dilapidated, but we can have a vision for, you know, a love of it first. That love has to arise in us to say that this has value, and it has a meaning deeper than what other people can see. And it is, you know, to kind of get to know it more intimately, and to really take the time to uncover its beauty, because the beauty is always there. It just needs to be uncovered. And, you know, when we start to go into ourselves, you know, it's a little bit like that. You know, it can be scary, it's unknown. We've got ancient aspects of ourselves, we've got modern aspects, we've got aspects and old furniture in ourselves that don't really suit this modern day, that there may be a shadow of the past that, you know, needs to be contemporized, you know, that it's, you know, old beliefs and old systems of thought that have just gone from generation to generation, and, you know, own beliefs about, you know, beliefs about the world and beliefs about ourselves that are untrue. So to sit in stillness is to enter into that unknown world, and can be scary at start to kind of retreat into that. But, you know, the Light Saber is a tool, is a weapon that you have presence. When you are present within the present moment, you have a support from life. Life will begin to support you on that journey. Because as this in this journey of self-discovery, we are discovering that we're not alone. We're not actually, we are supported. You know, we are helped and guided, and we are loved, and we are nurtured, and we are fundamental in reality, and we're actually part of a matrix and part of an interdependent system that's highly intelligent, that once we become aware of that, and we start to trust that it starts to help us on that journey. So taking time in stillness is inviting that intelligence into us. So I like to kind of visualize it. It was funny because when I started to kind of enter silence, it became extremely sweet, you know. It became such a sweet place for me to be, that I didn't need anything else. And I spent, as that silence, you know, I suppose grew and became more stable in me, there was very little else that I felt at that time that I needed. And you know, I equated, I suppose, the Light Saber. I had such a connection to the sunlight, the sun, and the presence of the loving sun was a symbol to me of that constant, beautiful, life-giving presence of life itself that was flooding us with everything that we need. And that it used to kind of, I suppose, maybe it kind of pierced my eyes in a way that had a kind of it met, the outside met the inside. You know, there was a kind of a meeting point where when we're sitting in stillness and in contemplation, we are allowing an inner kind of light to arise in us, and that can start to marry with the outer light. And there's a real connection that happens when we start to try to bring those aspects together, our inner and our outer light. And the Light Saber, I thought, you know, for in our present modern pop culture, you know, is it kind of became kind of like a little joke to myself, because I have this kind of very warm relationship with life, where I always see things kind of as funny, as like life is having jokes with me all the time. And, you know, because I see paradox and everything. So it's like somebody with a really kind of dry sense of humor. And because I know when I've done something that I've only just caused to myself and I've been shown it in a certain way. And, you know, the Light Saber is, you know, it's a tool, a weapon for you to train, to come into that presence, but also it grounds you. It grounds you in the moment, and it pierces through you, like, you know, like nothing else, you know. So as you become more established in it, it becomes like, you know, you become that warrior where you're very hard to rattle. And it can be very annoying for other people sometimes when they just can't rattle you, because you've got that steadiness and you've got that unshakability, you know. And this poem I wrote from the Clare Republic, called my Light Saber. My Light Saber, my life saver, my divine connector, my water finder. To you I surrender. A mighty sword impaled through my skull, piercing through my body, straight through my heart, ground into the earth. Now I stand erect, a soldier ready to serve. No mission defined, the only order: be alert, stay present, guard the temple of the soul. So it's a very powerful tool and weapon to use, is, you know, that cultivating that stillness and that connection, and inner connection with the outer the sunlight. And in Ireland we have a beautiful heritage of our connection with the sun. You know, I mean, I feel that actually within my poetry and my writing there seems to be a kind of a renaissance of that, you know, we have a fabulous heritage of our own wisdom tradition that has been covered over for centuries. And, you know, it is our legacy and it is our inheritance for us to take on board and take back into ourselves, you know, all these elements, the connection to the sun, you know, is something that Newgrange was designed around. And, you know, we look at ancient times and we think that they were primitive, but actually they have such a deep connection and understanding of our interconnection. And the problem with the climate crisis at the moment is that we have lost that understanding that we are nature and we are connected to nature, and that everything that we are, life works in cycles, and it works in harmony with itself, and we as human beings are out of harmony with that, and that is what's causing everything, the mental disorders, the disorders in society, in civil society, and the disorder in the environment. You know, it's just that we have a complete disconnection. So, you know, the reconnection to ourselves is a journey of understanding all of that as well. It's getting to know ourselves, but then reconnecting back into the understanding of our interconnection with everything else. So the sun is actually a theme that runs through all of my work, and you know, because I see it as a symbol of the source of all things. And you know, it's for us as human beings at this time to raise our consciousness, to come into that understanding, that communion with the higher consciousness of humanity's evolution, and which is where we're trying to go. And this is why I'm committed to these teachings, because this is our only option, is to higher our consciousness. It's our only option. We can't solve the problems that we have in our society, in the world, at the consciousness level that we're at the moment. It's impossible. So the only thing we can do is to train ourselves to come into a unified consciousness. And there's a lot of teachings, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of help that we have within ancient times, within, you know, Greek time, back in, you know, Plato and Aristotle, ancient back, you know, Ireland, we were, our culture is ancient before the Egyptians even, you know. So, you know, we need to look and to discern what from that we can reclaim, because life is built on principles, it's not built on rules. Rules and regulations are formed by humans and the human mind, and life works on principles. And when we go against the principles of life, then we get into trouble. So we need to relearn those principles, and we need to start to learn to live from those. So the weapons that we need are vitally important for training ourselves on that journey. And the stillness and the Light Saber that you'll be using is a training that we talked about. It's a daily training to bring some stillness into our lives and try to cultivate a deep connection with a silent, opened space for a newness and a new intelligence to arise. And the second weapon is a bow and arrow. So the bow and arrow has two elements. Like, we have the bow. So when we have the bow, we have to have a certain standing and stature. We need to be steady in ourselves. We need to steady our emotions and our to get ourselves ready to focus. And focus is vitally important in action in the world, in this contemplative action. So that is kind of like a readiness that we need to cultivate. And of course, when we are doing anything that is precise and that is targeted, we need to come into a silent space first, like we talked about. We have to build a stature, a stance, and a stability in ourselves. Then we need to cultivate focus for the target that we're trying to hit. And then the arrow itself, it's not the shaft of the arrow that is important about the arrow. That is just, that creates a steadiness, an equilibrium. That creates a levelness so that the arrowhead can hit its target. So the cultivating an equilibrium and a balance is the actual point of the arrow itself, that flies through the air. But the arrowhead is a triangle, and the triangle of the arrowhead is vitally important for this active contemplation that I keep talking about. And the philosophy of this, triad is present in all wisdom traditions. And even in our Celtic, we have the three spirals. In Christianity, we have the Trinity. In all areas, you go back to Greek times, we have this spoken about in many, many different ways, in different languages and in different ways of teaching. But in the way I like to look at it is, as I've talked about in the previous talk, I talked about Eros. I talked about the life energy, the force, that the fire of life, the creativity, the spirituality, the sexuality, that kind of force of wanting to move forward, that surge for life. And then, okay, we have that surge. We can feel that surge in our body once we've kind of created a space for that surge to arise in us. And then what will we do with that surge? That surge needs to be put into proper purpose. And it's not to be used in any which way we want, because life is highly intelligent and it always has, it doesn't waste energy. Life never wastes energy. Never, 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 never wastes energy. It's always creating and trying to advance itself to a certain goal and certain target. And when you become still, and when you've cultivated that presence with your Light Saber, and your Light Saber has given you that Eros, that life force, then you need to look to see, and you've got your steadiness, and you've got your equilibrium. You see everybody as being equal. Nobody being ahead of you, better than you, or worse than you. You want good for all. Then you want to see and listen to what is that purpose that life wants for you, and what are you here to do. So the triangle of the arrowhead for this second warrior tool, warrior weapon we have, comes with 3 elements. And we have logos, pathos, and ethos. So our logos is our logic, our mind. And our mind, our brain, is a tool. It's no more than that. it's an actual, like a tool. It's like an engine in the car, and the car is nothing. The engine is nothing without the actual energy in the car. You know, if you don't switch on the car and get the energy going in it, the engine doesn't do anything. It's useless. So our engine, our mind, our brain is a vehicle for what life wants to create, and wants to become active in the world. And it's a fabulous tool, and it is our, I suppose, it's where we can bring a lot of information in. It stores information. It stores old information and information about ourselves maybe that isn't so helpful. It also stores new information and new ideas. So we need to be feeding our mind and sharpening our mind and sharpening the arrowhead, sharpening it, making sure that it's sharp and it knows, it can discern, and it can be working in its best. And we need to, and how do we do that? We have to look after our mind in a way that we don't fill it with a lot of garbage. We clear it up and we clean it up, and we start to educate ourselves about, what is helpful and what is not helpful in our minds. And then we start to understand its limitations as well, because the mind is like a washing machine. It only can wash what's inside in the cycle. If you put all your clothes into a dryer into wash, and it's only black and white, and it's just going to go around and around and around with the contents of what's in that. You can't bring anything else into it. It hasn't had capacity. It's impossible for the mind to bring anything else into it, only what you feed it. So we have to understand its limitation on that aspect. The mind itself, people were talking about intelligence. Intelligence doesn't come just from the mind itself. That's just a vehicle. It's what you feed it and how you use it. So the logos is our logic and our mind, and then the pathos is our emotion, our feeling, our love, our heart. Here, our heart, our I suppose it's what we attach our intentions to. So our intentions need to come from our heart. We need, for women, sometimes, there can be an imbalance in that. Sometimes we're led by our heart too much and we don't use our logic enough. So there needs to be a balance between, these are on the same line, between our logic and our pathos. Our logos and our pathos need to be balanced, our mind and our heart. So we need to use our mind in a discerning way, and we need to have our heart intention in the right intent. So we need to become aware of our intention before we act. The action in the world that will have the most impact is going to be something that's heartfelt, that isn't just a personal desire. It's a desire that wants to heal something greater than just ourselves. And a lot of the time, sometimes we're driven by negative intentions, and that is always going to end badly for us. It's never going to, that's always going to kind of be an arrow that comes around and hits us in the back. So, we have to clean up that intention, that heart you know, so how do we get to the true logic and our true heart, and, you know, and balance these? And these two, when they're both balanced in a correct order, it leads to our ethos, our personal ethos. And our personal ethos is our purpose in life. It's actually what our service is in the world. So, you know, it's funny how sometimes I think the things that we're most passionate about are the things that we have been brokenhearted about. Something that we feel hurts us the most in the world. Some, you know, like a wound that we see in the world or we've had ourselves is something that is a clue nearly to our purpose, and how we can deepen our understanding of how we can actually try to not fight against that, but how can we enrich our communities where that issue will fall away. Because we have to be very careful, you know, there's a very, very fine line that we're walking when we're on this path. The spiritual path is a path of extreme discernment, and it's like that golden thread that just we have to keep, or even at all levels of our development, we need to keep our discernment very refined. It's a very refined discernment. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are interested in spirituality that get kind of washed away with, you know, a watered down version of a kind of pop culture version of spirituality, and they get washed into a kind of a, you know, a trend, and they get taken away from you know, maybe a very, very true kind of calling, but I suppose if they don't have the right guidance and they don't have the right discernment within themselves, and they don't have the community to support them, that they end up becoming self-indulgent about it, you know. So I suppose when it comes to action in the world and contemplative action isn't just coming from yourself. It's actually it's life expressing through you in action. So it's when those two weapons come together, when we have your stillness and your action in one. So you are acting out of life itself. You're not acting from a place of trauma. You're not acting from a place of, and even sometimes in, you know, climate action even, you know, we have people that are very passionate, but they can be very angry, and they're actually acting from a place of a negative pathos. We're not discerning enough in their mental capacity, in their logos. They're not looking at their own shadows. So that's why the Light Saber, that connection to truth is vitally important, because that is like a listening, a constant listening and silencing to feel and questioning ourselves all the time and our deepest intention. Are we looking for popularity? Are we looking for lots of followers? Are we looking for, you know, using the eros to, you know, that fire, that passion, but we've targeted it in the wrong direction. It's not actually going in a direction that life wants to go. It's not going in the direction of interdependence and harmony. A good sign of that is if there's an enemy. If you feel there's an enemy within your system, if there's something that you're fighting against, then no, you need to come back again, and you need to reflect, and you need to look again with your logos and see, question in that silence again. And, you know, look with your arrow internally and see where in my past am I creating a separation, you know? Because you always have to be life affirming. It's not to say that it's okay for certain things to happen in the world and that we sit back and we're passive. Absolutely not. But we have to be for life, not against. Because we're in a time, in this space and time, that is crucially important, because we're going to come to a point where there's a massive division between people who are going to want to rebel and in a way that's destructive, and there's going to be people who want to build a new foundation on the principles of life and the principles of life itself. And you need to be on the side that is life affirming, you know. And we need to, it's a waking up, you know, it's a waking up to a truer reality, and it takes time and discernment for that. But these tools, the Light Saber and the archer, you know, the bow and arrow and the arrowhead, these are vital. These are vital for your journey in this space of self-discovery. And you use them again and again and again and again. And as you, like with any warrior, they need to train them. They need to train and train and train and train and train. And as you start off, first, you don't even know what. You've never held one before. You don't know what I'm talking about. It sounds completely foreign to you. You don't know. But as you develop your skills and as you become more proficient, it'll become much easier. And then you will become, you know, like a master archer, or, you know, you will eventually, over time, excel into that space. And now, I'll go into more detail with this as we go forward, but these are my philosophies and my ways of, I suppose, working with principles on the inner world, on the interior, in the interior design of our new psyche, of our uncovering of our soul, you know, the uncovering of our truth. And I don't, you know, I won't indulge. I won't indulge illusion, you know. So if anyone has questions for me about any of this, or anything that they've seen in the world that they are interested in, if they want my feedback on anything like that, I'll be open to chat to them about them and about it, and tell them, guide them on how I see it. You know, I suppose there's, you know, there is also a readiness within ourselves that we need to have as well. And, you know, I suppose when any teaching or any lessons that we're learning for the first time, it's very difficult to hear, because it's so foreign to us. It's foreign to our ears, and it's a new subject that we haven't heard before. But, you know, there has to be an openness and a readiness within people for this type of content and this type of learning, and this inquiry into our inner design. And you know, to cultivate that, I suppose, initially, our initial awareness that we need to develop is even when you're listening to me, you know, how much judgment is arising in you? You know, how much reaction is coming to your mind when I say something? How much are you arguing with it within your head? How much do you not want to hear it? How much do you feel it's something that you prefer to ignore? And or is it something that excites you, and do you feel it's something that you want to learn more about? Do you feel, I'm not really sure about what she's talking about, but it sounds really interesting and I'd like to hear more about her her learnings or her journey in those areas? You know, are you feeling connected? Are you feeling intrigued? Are you feeling it's something that it feels time for you to look into and to develop more, and that you want to train these things, these aspects of yourself, you know? Because there's no point in listening if you don't want to. You know, it has to be a need and a want and an aspiration for it and a calling for it, because I suppose life, as I say, is based on principles. It's not personal. It's there's both personal and impersonal. So, you know, when you're listening to a spiritual teacher, you're listening to them, and you're asking for guidance, and you're asking for, it's an action of asking for help, and it's an action of, you know, humility, because you're saying that I don't know all the answers, I don't have the answers, I don't know, and I have the humility to say that I'm not right, haven't been correct, and I haven't had the capacity to be able to live my life the way I want to, and that I feel is true enough to me. So it's actually an action of humility, which is something that is a state that we need to get to. And, you know, life will bring us to humility, regardless of whether you're listening to a spiritual teacher or you're looking for guidance. Life is going to bring you to humility, because it's the way it's designed. It's designed to humble us back to our truth. So whether you're listening to me or whether you're you feel that's not something that's interesting to you enough, life will do it. Life's our teacher. It's the way it's set up, the design of it, the logic of it is always and can never be any other way. It's highly intelligent. Every thought you have in your mind, every thought that goes into action, every way you say something, the phrase and ways, you know, and the repeated actions that you do, repetition every day, and your automatic way of thinking and talking and speaking to people, all of that creates your reality. And your reality is always coming back to you, you know, it's bouncing back to you. So whatever you put out, it'll come back. It's like playing tennis against a brick wall, you know. There's always going to be a bounce back, always, until you find a window, and then you can throw your ball through the window and it won't come back to you, you know, or it'll come back to you in a beautiful way. It'll be transformed in some other, you know, so you're putting quality out into the world. So, you know, I'll go into these warrior weapons in more detail as we go forward, but this is the introduction into that philosophy of the Light Saber and the archer, the bow and arrow, and the pathos, logos, and ethos that we need to cultivate. And our ethos is the most important, which is you know, the direction in which our life force is going to be aimed at, and the goal in which we are here to, and the target we are here to hit. So these are my teachings for today, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and I'll be many more topics to talk about. And I feel actually that maybe, you know, eventually, hopefully, it'd be fabulous to have a gathering and to have some kind of a, you know, in time with vaccinations, you know, make it safe for us to be together. It'd be fabulous to have a gathering and to have maybe more talks in person, and then I'd be able to answer questions, and we could have workshops together, and we can bring in people who to talk on different topics as well, to help us along that journey, because we do need a lot of guidance and help in different aspects of our understanding of ourselves and relationship. And you know, okay, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again. Take care. Bye.